For decades, economists have modeled the global market as a massive mechanical engine. This classical view defines the economy by the allocation of scarce material resources, driven by three simple gears: production, distribution, and consumption. Foundational figures like John Maynard Keynes established this material bias. Under this classical macroeconomic baseline, distribution is treated as a secondary outcome of physical production, a byproduct rather than a primary structural driver. But the modern digital era has completely replaced physical dominance with invisible algorithmic coordination and massive data extraction. This shift creates the cognitive recognition economy. In this layer, human attention, social status, and algorithmic visibility dictate market value. Simultaneously, the field of neuroeconomics, championed by researchers like Daniel Kahneman, has mapped how individual brains compute value and evaluate risk based on localized triggers of fear and reward. Classical material flow equations fail to predict modern behavior because they ignore these neurological triggers and the scarcity of human attention. Modern economic activity reflects a system designed to manage, direct, and extract value from collective human cognition. Understanding this cognitive material hybrid requires a new framework, the Brain Kinematics Model, or BKM. This network topology illustrates the core BKM concept. The economy is a dynamic strain field. Every individual and institution acts as a node that generates, stores, routes, and discharges cognitive and financial strain. This creates a micro to macro pathway. When millions of individual brains synchronize around the same localized fear, like a bank run, or the same hope, like a speculative bubble, these tiny neural strain packages aggregate. They merge into the massive structural waves we recognize as market volatility or inflation. The pathway then reverses. Once those massive economic structures form, the resulting scarcity or price shocks re-enter the brain. This feedback loop alters individual human attention spans and stress levels. Material pressures provide a clear example. High housing costs and debt burdens physically narrow human time horizons, biologically forcing the brain into short-term, survival-based decision biases. Symbolic pressures, such as brand prestige and digital ranking systems, actively train the brain's reward circuitry, modifying dopamine-linked anticipation and impulse control. In the BKM framework, the economy and the human brain form a single, unbroken bidirectional loop. Neural strain generates the market, and the market continuously reconstructs the brain. This bidirectional loop manifests differently depending on your position in the network. Class position is a distinct thermodynamic state of cognitive strain. Every class regime is governed by three variables: strain input, or the incoming pressures, storage capacity, meaning savings and security, and discharge mode, which dictates how that strain is released. Notice this waveform. The poor operate in a high-frequency, unstable state. Unpredictable strain inputs, like fluctuating rent or debt, hit nodes with near-zero storage capacity. Because the strain cannot be stored, it undergoes survival-driven discharge, disappearing into urgent consumption. This creates a chronic, stress-dominated neuroeconomic state. When strain dissipates this rapidly, the brain lacks the biological stability required to form long-term asset structures. The middle class operates in an oscillating regime. Moderate storage capacity allows for accumulation, but it leaves these nodes sensitive to external shocks. A single medical debt spike can crash the entire sine wave, wiping out years of stored strain. This creates a mixed neuroeconomic environment, where the brain oscillates constantly between long-term planning and fear-based reaction to instability. Poverty and the squeezed middle represent highly constrained, physically inescapable thermodynamic states. The third regime, the investment owners, exists in a state of controlled accumulation. For the owner class, strain inputs are self-generated through capital returns and asset appreciation. Their storage capacity is effectively unlimited. Strain discharge is strategic and optional. Because survival is never at stake, releases can be looped back to grow the overall reservoir. This stability changes the brain's operation. Without survival stress, cognition is optimized for long-term, strategic optionality. This regime also controls the cognitive recognition economy, managing the platforms and media that establish what is visible and valuable across the network. Digital platform economies accelerate this by acting as massive strain attractors. Central nodes consume the visibility and energy of the lower, weaker nodes. The empirical research of Thomas Piketty anchors this reality. The rate of return on capital outpaces economic growth, making wealth concentration a mathematical certainty. This completes the loop. Economic dominance enables strategic, stress-free brain behavior, which mathematically reinforces that dominance. Modern economic complexity naturally drifts toward capital owners, structurally trapping lower network nodes in a permanent state of high-frequency discharge. BKM redefines public policy as the engineering of macro-level strain and flow. It is the primary mechanism for redirecting destructive pressures within the network. Protective policies, such as affordable housing and universal healthcare, act as a mechanical buffer. Look at the waveform. This policy intervention flattens the sharp spikes and lowers the baseline amplitude of the wave. Lowering this chronic input strain physically frees up working memory and prevents the forced discharge seen in vulnerable populations. Capacity-building policies, such as public education, act by expanding strain storage. This expanded storage allows unstable, raw strain to be safely held and transformed into structured, long-term capabilities and skills. Global institutions increasingly recognize this structural necessity. Without the capacity to store and process capital, raw financial injections fail to stabilize developing nodes. Social programs do more than transfer wealth. They stabilize the neuroeconomic time horizon of the working class. The final lever involves market-shaping policies, such as antitrust laws and progressive taxation. In a BKM framework, these function as pressure release valves on an unbalanced network. By breaking up oversized attractor nodes, we prevent the monopolistic concentration of stabilizable strain. The redirected energy flows back into the broader network, stabilizing the weaker nodes. Recognition policies further ensure that marginalized groups are economically visible, allowing strain flows to route to them properly. Economic justice is a measurable structural property of network flow. System stability requires perfect equilibrium. A society is only stable when no individual node is trapped in forced, high-frequency discharge. A healthy economy requires preventing runaway accumulation at the top, while simultaneously expanding storage capacity at the bottom. Policy governs the cognitive evolution of society itself.